Okay, welcome to episode 21 of the Sean McGuinness podcast. Thank you for the feedback from last week's episode with Owen. Definitely applicable to a lot of people because we're all running around stressed and burned out, although we do have the best intentions about being productive and getting shit done. We just need to be aware of that, otherwise we're going to run ourselves into the ground and burn the candle at both ends, like your granny said. Now, today's episode is going to be a few different topics that I always come up with or my clients are faced with and that I end up explaining over and over and over again, which is fine. But for a lot of people who may not have a coach, they are going to be faced with these, let's call them head fucks, situations where you just have no idea what is going on. Okay. Now, the first one is, why isn't my weight going down every week? So if we imagine weight loss, especially the first 1 or 2 weeks, you'll probably step on the scales and lose weight if you're in a deficit, simply because you're obviously in a deficit, but a lot of people, they may drop their carbs down, they may be training more, they may be thus holding less water in the body. So the scales are going to go down. Again, side note, this is why people they get obsessed with low carbs and ketogenic diets, because they lose a fucking heap of weight, but it's all water weight in the first few weeks. Most of it's water weight, and then they think it's unbelievable, and then they eat some carbs again and store more. So for every gram of carb you eat, you store around 3 grams of water. So if you eat a pizza, you could be a kilo heavier. That's not fat gain, that's just water gain. You're just holding more fluid and glycogen in your muscles. So they eat carbs again, and then they go up on the scales, and then they claim, oh, carbs make me fat. Again, not the thing. And this is why, if anyone watches UFC or MMA or boxing, these guys are dropping sometimes 7 to 10 kilos from weigh-in, and then they regain that, replenish the glycogen and get drink and hydrate back up again. That's 10 kilos in one day. That's just water weight. Okay, so yes, this happens at the start. People lose weight, the scales go down, they go yippee, oh, it's unbelievable. They get that dopamine hit from reward, and then maybe, I don't know, could be the next week after, it could be 2 weeks, or it could be dropping, and then it goes back up. And you go, what the fuck is going on? I stuck to everything last week. I did my steps. I did hit my calories. I got enough sleep. Why is this going up? Because now you have associated the scales going down with obviously a positive thing. And then you think when the scales goes up, it's a big negative thing. What we need to be aware of, and again, sorry, as a side note, this may not only happen for 1 week, this may go up or stay the same for 2 weeks or sometimes 3 weeks. And what we need to be aware of, and I swear if you're not aware of this, you'll probably never get past the point where this happens to get results, because you'll probably give up and get fed up. Or when the scales go up, you go, why did I even bother? I'm just going to have that pizza and I'm going to pig out and I'm going to not account for any of this and I'm just going to give up. F this. You need to be aware that weight loss and fat loss is never, ever, ever, ever linear. Okay? Get that into your head. Now, this is not to say that you're not losing fat every week. Okay? Because this may be the case. But the scales will never go down linear. So, okay, you say, I'm going to have this amount of calories and this how much I should drop every week. If it's a percent of body weight and you're 90 kilos, 0.9 should drop 0.9. You do a little spreadsheet and your Excel spreadsheets, and you should be this weight at this date, etc., etc. Okay, it doesn't work like that. What will probably happen is it may average out at that weight over time, but it will never drop. So if you think of a linear graph, it will never just go straight down. What will happen is it's just a zigzag. So you may lose a kilo, then you may lose half a kilo, and then you get on the scales the third week and again it goes up a kilo, and then it may stay like that for the fourth week, and then it drops 2 kilos. It's never linear. It's kind of that zigzag. If any of you seen the posts I put up on my client's weight, it will just be zigzag, okay? Zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. And the crazy thing is, you may have lost weight and you're gone into week 2, okay, 2 kilos down, and then you measure your progress in week 4 again, and then you're back to the same as you were in week 2, and you go, what is going on? But over time, if you get this out for weeks and months and you stick with it and you're on the right plan, it will just be a linear curve that goes down, even though it's zigzagging up and down, up and down, up and down within a few kilos. It becomes more of a obvious trend over time. But if people are stuck just comparing week to week, they might never get to that stage. So get your head around this. What people need to differentiate is weight gain and fat gain. Okay, just because the scales goes up doesn't mean you've gained fat. Okay, as we said, there's a million reasons why the water weight will fluctuate in our bodies. Okay, because we are made of mostly water. So first is your carbohydrate intake. Okay, and this is also the reason why I get my clients to weigh in a few times a week, because if you just compare one week to the next week, well, again, a lot of the variables may be different, so it's hard to compare. So I might get them 3 or 4 times, even sometimes every day. That will become a clearer trend. Get them to weigh in, and you can take the average of the week, or we can do some good things there. So carbohydrate intake will fluctuate. The scales, stress. So when cortisol is high, it has an effect on the hormone aldosterone, and that's involved in water retention. So when you're stressed, you can retain more water. Okay. Obviously your menstrual cycle. So for girls, some gain a lot of water weight around the 3rd and 4th week. So for you guys, you mightn't even compare week to week, because you'll be going crazy. So the first 2 weeks of your menstrual cycle are going to be your lighter weeks. What you can do, and what Lyle McDonald recommends for people, all his women's fat loss stuff is unbelievable, is to compare week 1. So you might get your average of week 1 and then compare that to your average week 1, month 2. Okay, so you're comparing the different months, because within those weeks your hormonal, and it's going to fluctuate way too big to be able to compare. Some women mightn't even weigh in the 4th week, because everything's going crazy then. Sodium. So obviously if you eat out and you may have a meal out and you weigh in, you go, oh, I've gained weight from this meal. You haven't gained weight from that meal. You've probably just had more carbs, like we said. You probably have more salt, so then you're going to retain more water, etc., etc. So for you to gain, what you need to understand, and it's a good way to put it in perspective, for you to gain 0.5 kilo of fat, okay, this is not weight on the scales, it's fat, you need to eat over your calories by 3,500 calories, so 3,500 calories. And this is over your maintenance. So if you're in a deficit, add 500 calories onto that for your maintenance, okay? And then in one day, add 3,500 calories onto that, okay? Nobody's eating 7,000 calories, whatever it is, in a day to gain weight. It will gradually happen over time. That's why if you gradually eat over 500 calories over your maintenance every day for a week, okay, then it's possible, and fat loss, fat gain and losses are both great gradual things. But if you think you have a meal out and you went over your calories by a little bit and you're gaining 0.5 kilo to a kilo of weight, it's not happening, okay? Trust me, it's not happening. What you need to take into account of all these things, like we said, when we eat more carbs and stuff, that we're going to gain more weight. In that case, okay, say you had a big carby weekend, you may not have even gone over your calories, you may just predominantly have eaten a lot of that. If you're that carbohydrates turn into glycogen, and that's stored in your muscles with water, and that's why obviously bigger body weights are going to fluctuate more, because they have more room to store more energy and water. But it will take, so if you start training again and eating normally, and then while you're training and your body's tapping into that glycogen stores, your energy stores, it could take 5 to 7 days for that to come back to normal. So that's why if I had clients that have had a big carby weekend, I say, don't worry, just give it kind of 5 to 7 days for it to come back to where it was. This is only purely water weight, because you've just fueled up your car. So to get it back to where it was before, for you to compare on the scales, you need to wait a few days. Okay. Measuring progress. This is why obviously you need to be aware of this. Okay. If it goes up, don't freak out. In some cases you may see a trend in that the week it goes up, okay, the next week that usually drops. Okay. And you will also use measurements and pictures with that, because if you have a freak out that you've gained weight, just to settle the crazy little brain in that skull, you may go and do your measurements again and see, oh shit, I've dropped centimeters, wow, and that just gives you a nice little positive reinforcement. The same way with pictures as well. So obviously this is why we're using a number of variables, but the main point there was that never expect the weight to drop every week. It will probably average out if you're on track over time, but it will never do that. And again, refer back to Instagram. I've done heaps of videos on this. Don't get disheartened when that goes up, and remember how many calories it takes to actually gain weight as well with that. And this is why when people don't take these things into account, it's why people go mad with the scales and develop a bad relationship. But it's actually in my opinion, really good method to measure progress, because it's the most easily accessible thing to do. And when we can understand it in a logical fashion, it takes that emotional anger out that we may feel against it. Okay, we're just using it, but you need to understand the reliability and the validity when we're using that as well. Okay, so this is why I get my clients, as I said, to weigh in a few days a week. Okay, within that, if our weight doesn't fluctuate, we're not a girl, and our weight doesn't fluctuate much around our menstrual cycle, we can compare week to week, but we can compare the average week to week. Okay, so not only are we not expecting our weight to drop, but we're using the average just to see, because there's going to be higher days within that. And what I normally say is, once you can obviously see if your average weight per week's going down, look if you are hitting your lowest weight. Okay, so, oh shit, I hit this weight I never hit before. Cool, that means you're making progress. Even if it does go back up within that week, don't be disheartened. And then you may say, okay, shit, my highest weight is getting lower. So if your highest weight was 80 kilos and you haven't hit 80 kilos in a while, well, guess what? You're making progress. And then if sometime within that month you've hit 78 kilos, but even the next day it goes up to 79, well, you're making progress, because you never hit 78 before. And it would be hard to not lose weight to hit 78 kilos. So you're obviously losing weight, something's happening. And then we can use the other variables with that as well. There is even the theory that Lon McDonald talks about called the whoosh effect. Whoosh, I think it is. Where he says he sees a phenomenon that women, maybe more because the water fluctuates, but it can happen in men as well, I think, where they're in a deficit, they're doing everything properly, they can feel their clothes getting looser, they can see the measurements going down, pictures looking better, but nothing's happening on the scales, and this is over a few weeks. And he theorized it in the fact that you may be losing fat from the cell, okay, but because your body is always trying to maintain a constant weight, so wants to stay the same weight, those fat cells may fill up with water, so your body's staying around a similar weight. Okay, it always wants homeostasis. It doesn't really like change. So what's happening is that you're losing fat, your measurements are going down, you're looking better, but because you're holding more water in those fat cells, or because of the reasons we talked about before, nothing's happening on the scales. And then suddenly you wake up and you weigh in, and all that water weight has dropped and you've lost a few kilos. It can also happen just trying to think of different phenomena. There's a certain type of stressful person that really goes all in when they lose fat, and is a certain maybe neurotic type where they get frustrated when there's not change, and they're naturally very high stress, high strung person. I'll get these people when the scales goes up and they go, "Fuck, Sean, what am I paying you for? The scale's not moving. What the hell's going on here?" And it'll be in capital letters. And for these people, a lot of time, it can be that because they're so highly stressed, they're retaining more water from the mechanisms we talked about before, aldosterone, and it's only when they chill the fuck out, and in Lon McDonald's words, like, gets laid, gets drunk, or maybe smokes a joint and chills out, they wake up the next day, and all the water has dropped. So that's another phenomenon, maybe talking to you, listener, to take into account as well. And lastly, when we are using weight as a construct of measuring progress, we also need to take into account what can happen in beginners. Namely, very obese people, or very athletic people, or people who have weight trained before, stop for a while, and then they're getting back to weight training. And that's a phenomenon of losing fat and gaining muscle. And it can only happen, as I said, these circumstances, and also people who take steroids as well, which we also need to take into account. So you weigh in and your measurements are going down, you're looking better in pictures, but your weight's staying the same, again, probably because you're gaining muscle and you're losing fat at the same time. Now, this does not happen to everyone. So for the people that say, the scales isn't moving, I'm losing fat and gaining muscle, most of the time you're not. It's a very small percentage of people. So you don't use that cop-out excuse if you're not. You go, I'm going great, I'm gaining muscle, but in theory you're just like, you're not getting results. So just be aware of that as well. But in those certain cases, we do need to take that into account. But that phenomenon will stop after a few weeks. So I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 weeks where you gain a bit of muscle, losing a bit of fat. Scales doesn't move, but then it starts moving again because you can't maximize your potential. For most people, you're either losing fat or you're either gaining fat or gaining muscle. Okay, you can't do both, because normally you can't build muscle when there's no resources there, because you're trying to give your body less resources for it to tap into fat stores. But other than the people I talked about, that may not apply to you, but it's nice to know as well. Okay, now I think I covered everything in basic terms when it comes to measuring progress on the scales. Again, for people that have had a bad relationship, I do recommend it. Okay, there may be some extreme cases where I don't, but a lot of the time, I think it's good when we take back and think of it in a logical fashion. And there is like research that say people that do weigh in every day lose more weight, and just as, or even more importantly, keep that weight off long term. Because I always say, it's just like you gotta have a big night out and you're shouting everyone round and you think you're Conor McGregor buying everyone all the expensive drinks, and you wake up on Sunday and go, fucking hell, I'm after spending a fortune. I don't even want to know how much I've spent. So you don't check your bank balance, and then you try to buy a bottle of water on Monday and you get declined. Not that's happened to me, but I've just heard from friends. So obviously, be in denial about where we're at, we can't measure it. So if you're looking at your bank balance, you're going to save it better. The same way when you're measuring progress on the scales. From a daily thing, it's obviously hard to measure your centimeters and pitches on a daily basis, because they're not going to change. You're not going to see any difference on a daily basis. So that's when you can use the scales. And even from training clients, when they do hold themselves accountable and either track their weight into the app or send me a picture of the scales, it kind of reminds them, okay, let's snap into this. I'm in fat loss mode now. And they may make better conscious decisions for the rest of the day as well. So I think once you take all these variables into account, we can use the scales in a way that are going to help rather than hinder us, and break that old relationship we have with them, and use that information accordingly. So I hope you learned a little bit from that, a little or a lot. Go off, reset the batteries in the scales. Don't let all these fucking women's magazines tell you not to weigh yourself. You don't need that negativity, okay? Because go into your boss tomorrow and say, oh, you know what? I'm not measuring the profits, okay? Positivity. Get the fuck out. Your boss will tell you to leave on the spot, okay? It's the same thing. Again, what gets measured gets managed. So we think of this as a metric that we want to use in a way that is going to help us get to a goal, look sexy, regain our confidence, our happiness, and all these beautiful things, okay? Use it in a way that's going to help you. So there you go, signing off, episode 21, short one. Next week we have Luke Lehman on the podcast, which is going to be great. So, yes, love you all. Please rate, review, share, all the other things podcasts tell you to do. Do it for mine, don't do it for anyone else. And I'll talk to you all in the next episode.